All right, I'm starting the recording now, and this is Thursday, May 14th, the year 2020, and it's just after 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And this is the ArcGIS Parcel Fabric seminar series that we're doing, and we've been doing this in conjunction with um, Fairview Industries and Panic Consulting. Again, we'll just go real quickly go through these slides, and then we'll get started on this. So Fairview is Nancy von Meyer. Nancy actually had mentioned she was going to try and be here today, but it looks like she isn't here yet. I think most of us know Nancy. She sort of has been a national leader on parcels, and she and I were talking one day, and she said, "You know, Frank, we need to start doing seminars or start doing some education," and I think that's helped. That's helped quite a bit to sort of establish this, and so thank you, Nancy, for that. Panic Consulting, I think most of you know us by now, so we'll go over that. The GoToMeeting interface, just sort of, I think it's, most of you have been here already, but let's just make sure. Webcams, you can control who's being shown right now. Chris and I are the only two that have a webcam active, so you can either turn them all off or you can keep them on if you want to continue looking at our faces, our lovely faces. If you want to see who else is here, you can go ahead and click on the People tab, and that will go and list everyone that's in the meeting right now. The chat tab is actually very important because that's how we communicate, because most of the time we'll have everybody turned off. Sorry. So most of the time we will mute everybody on here, but we will be watching, and Chris is going to be moderating and looking at the chat window to make sure that if there's any questions or comments, we take care of those right away. So please put them in the chat window. You can put them to everyone, or you can just do it to one or two people. For most questions, we prefer you just make them to everyone so that everyone can see them and sort of help answer them just in case we don't have to interrupt on there. Then finally, the audio and camera settings. If you're having any problems, you might click over on here, and this tells you and allows you to go and switch between your various devices that are available, whether you're dialing in with a phone or you're using headsets or mics or whatever. All right. Our goals, and we've talked about this before, is that this is an interactive learning experience. I am trying to avoid this being just a set of slides we go through. We're only going to have a short number of slides. We want to try to make this an event, not a webinar. And by event, I mean that this should be as interactive as possible. We should be talking to one another on this. We should not be talking at you. We want to talk with one another. You must ask questions, either audio or chat. And every once in a while, I'll break into the audio just to let you go it. And Chris will be moderating this. Just a reminder, we send out notices on this, email notices. Hopefully they're not getting bounced to spam. Right now have about a 40% rate of people that actually open them, but we are still getting quite a bit that's getting bounced around. I think some of that might be because many of you are still working from home and we can see what gets bounced to different emails. But just make sure that you subscribe to it on here, and right down here you can either update your preferences as far as which ones you get. You can unsubscribe from the list if you don't want to get those anymore. And here's the preferences, the 4 seminar series that we have. Right now we're sending everything to everybody. So at the moment we're trying to just get as many people involved with this as possible. So let's start this. So some of the things we wanted to do was we want to find out whether there's something specifically that you would be looking for us to address. We want to make sure that we're taking care of whatever you need to know about. And we want to make sure that we're covering that we're answering the questions that you have. There she is. Nancy, is your audio in? Can you hear us?
Sorry, it's muted.
Oh,
Yes, I
that's
can hear
okay.
you fine. Thanks.
Nancy, I was just talking about you, and I was hoping that you were going to show up today, and thank you. Thank you. Um,
Oh, thanks. Get on.
yeah. So as with all of us, we're all in lockdown, but we're starting to ease up around the country. Some of us are getting out a little bit more. So um, yeah, so I'm glad you're here, Nancy. So I was just asking, do we have something specifically that anybody wants to see? Nancy, I know you and I have talked, and what is it that you're looking to get out of these things? And we're just opening up the questions right now. Is there something that overwhelmingly, we just want to see how to do this thing? We've covered a couple of these before, both in the ArcGIS Parcel Fabric seminar and the ArcGIS Pro seminar, but I want to make sure that we cover and we answer any questions that anybody might have out there. So, Nancy, you get to control the first thing. What would you like to talk about today, or what do you want to cover today?
Well, I was primarily interested in. I think a lot of us are going to be doing the parcel editing, not in the fabric, in the ArcGIS, whatever they call it, ArcPro.
ArcGIS Pro, yeah.
Initially, ArcGIS Pro. And I think that's going to be, and I think because the tools in the ArcGIS Pro for the fabric and just for raw editing are very similar, if not identical. And so I was just thinking about the kinds of tools we do. And so I've got a data set that's either in ArcMap or it's in the Parcel Fabric, and I want to go to Pro. And I want to do that because I want to be able to do cloud sharing. I want to be able, like we did with Hawaii, Frank. Remember, they wanted to,
Right.
because of this whole, and this is going to be more frequent, right? People working at home is going to be more frequent. So we want to be able to log into a cloud and do the editing and check things back. Going to be much easier in ArcGIS Pro. And so I just was kind of wanted to have an opportunity for us to talk about, I've been very impressed with how easy the tools are to use outside of the fabric adjustment tools. And I just thought gaining additional familiarity with how those tools are used, even the curve tools, whatever people do for normal editing, that was my interest. And of course, you know how jazzed I was about the vertical integration tool, because that I see that so often in parcel data sets, is that vertical integration.
Yeah.
And then lastly, I kind of wanted to get a sense from folks on board was a lot of people rely on your parcel data to do their stuff, zoning, administrative boundaries, stormwater assessment, on and on and on. How are you communicating the changes in your parcel data to those dependent layers? And how would that be done using the Parcel Pro? So I'm not used to this terminology, ArcGIS Pro tools as opposed to the ArcMap tools.
Yeah.
And so that was sort of my hidden agenda for y'all on the call, but I don't want to tell you what you need to see and what you need to do. So I would like those of you doing the work every day to dominate what expertise Frank and Chris give us, because Chris is the first guy I knew that actually edited a real parcel map in ArcGIS Pro. I mean, he actually sat down and actually made the edit in ArcGIS Pro. I mean, I dinked around, but he actually made a real life, had to be kept edit. And so this is an expertise that we have an opportunity to learn from. I'll be quiet. You know me, I can talk forever.
Nancy, you just gave us you gave us multiple seminars worth of things that we can do. So let's go and talk about this. And I'm sorry, I just got distracted. I got an email from Kelly. wanting to know today's invitation. So let's go and talk about this, because you just brought up a very interesting point. The fact that it is with the ArcMap Parcel Fabric, it was really easy in that there was a clear distinction between one set of tools and another set of tools. But in ArcGIS Pro and the way they've implemented it, it blurs. It blurs, and you're not quite
Yeah.
sure, what do I focus on and where do I do this? So let's start with just this core thing, this core question. What is the parcel fabric and what can you do with it? So I hate to do this, but I'm going to go and mute everybody. And thank you. I'm going to mute everybody, and Chris will go and moderate and make sure that all comments and everything are brought forth on me. So let's start with this first question. What
Are
is...
you,
Go ahead, sir.
before you jump in, I just want to add an additional question into the mix from Brian. He says, hi, Frank. Can we also review how parcels that previously contained line points in ArcGIS are being handled in ArcPro, especially post-migration from ArcGIS to ArcPro?
Yes, yes.
Perfect.
And we will talk about that today. I will make sure that we talk about that today. So let's start with this. What is the parcel fabric? And those of us that are sort of computer people, we can look at this thing and say, oh, this little blue thing here, that's the parcel fabric. Well, what is that? It was clear in ArcMap that the parcel fabric was a structure that constrained how things fit together. All right? It's gone. It's gone. Instead, inside of Pro, the parcel fabric, and this is, and Esri shudders when I say this, but the way I describe it is that the parcel fabric is a super topology. All right? It is not a data structure as much as it's a tool that we can use to check what we've built to make sure that it complies with the rules that we've established for the parcel fabric. So that when we utilize the parcel fabric, what we do is we say, this thing that I have right now, this is a parcel, make sure that I have a polygon, make sure that I have lines that are associated with that polygon, make sure I have points at every break that I have in there, and make sure that they topologically fit within themselves. Not that they fit the surrounding things, but that they topologically fit within themselves. And then you can go deeper and say, well, also make sure that it complies with the attribute rules that I've created for it. And there, as we go down through the levels, there's a whole set of things that we can do. We can create a rule that says that, for example, if I create a traverse and it doesn't close, don't let me make a parcel. Make sure that my traverse is closed. So there's, again, it depends upon how deep you want to go, but at its core, the parcel fabric is sort of a controller to say, I want to make sure that all the rules that you've established are in compliance. That's all it does. It's not a separate structure, even though it does have specific components to it. But it has, for example, it has, turn this off here. It has, if I look over here in my table of contents, it has a specific set of feature classes that you may or may not normally have. It has a line feature class which says these are connection lines. These are lines that aren't necessarily involved with the parcel, but they're part of where this thing is located. And then it's got a set of points. These points define the ends of the parcels, and they can be solely related to one parcel, or they can be shared amongst other parcels. All right. Then it has a set of records. A record is sort of a little bit tougher to understand. A record is a polygon feature class, which keeps track of, I shouldn't say it keeps track of, it's the thing that if you build something with a record, everything you build gets marked with that record. All right, so it's a common set of attribution for that record. And really the important thing on that is that it keeps track of the global ID. So everything I create while I have a record gets marked with the global ID of that record. Right? And then it has a set of topology. And if I open up this topology and look at the topology, and by the way, here's my feature classes, which are all the layers that are inside my parcel fabric. And if I look at the rules associated with it, these begin, and these rules just repeat themselves for every single type of parcel type that I have. That the endpoints must be covered by a point. They've got to have a point on the end of them. That the section lines must not have dangles. That they must not self-intersect themselves. That the section lines must be covered by the boundary, and so that you can't have a line that is not covered by the boundary of a polygon. And then finally, that polygons have to have lines on them. So all of the topology rules that come out of the box are focused on the elements of that parcel type. They do not, out of the box, have topology rules that go inter-layer or inter-feature class. It's only, let's make sure that that structure for this single parcel type is consistent. All the lines are on top of the boundaries of the polygons. All the polygons have lines on them. The lines don't have dangles or overshoots on them. And at the end of the lines, we've got points. Those are the rules. So those are the basic topology rules that we as parcel mappers have been using for years. All this does is it enforces them. That's all. So what
Frank, we have a couple questions. Nancy said, so it isn't a polygon of the area covered by the record? And then she said, and one line could have more than one record?
Yes. Yeah. So let me answer those questions. So a record is unique in that, and I'm going to go in and create this just sort of to illustrate. All right. I'm going to go and create a record over here. All right. And again, there isn't a whole lot of stuff in here, but that active record sort of turns on the parcel fabric tools here. And I'm on the parcels tab, and here are the specific tools. Now, if you watch, when I go and minimize this record hub, which is what this is called here, those tools disable themselves. It won't let you do anything because that parcel fabric is turned off. When I re-enable them, those tools become active again. So again, it's nothing more than a series of tools to help you finish building your parcels. So let's start with this. Let me go over here, and I'm just going to create a polygon. All right. Now, when I create that polygon, it's just a polygon. It doesn't have points on it, doesn't have lines on it, doesn't have anything on it. Well, because the parcel fabric has these rules, when I say, hey, let's make sure that that's a parcel, it built my lines. It built my points at the ends of them. Now that has all of that on there. So what that's done is when I clicked build, it tested that polygon that I had created, which had been tagged with the global ID from here. It says, okay, let's check this polygon that's sitting out there. Does it have lines? Does it have points? If not, let's build them. That's all it does. All right. But it also went and created over in the record a polygon that has the same geometry as that. Now, if I keep this same record active, I can go over and say, well, let's just create another polygon. All right, and I can unclear this. It doesn't have to be selected because the software knows that new polygon I created has already been tagged. And I'll show you here that if I go to the attributes area, this polygon has already been tagged here, says it's been created by, that's the global ID of the record. That's what that is. So it says, okay, that's now I know what it is. And I can say, well, make sure that this is a real parcel. So I can say build it. Sure enough, it went and built the lines, went and built the points for me. And it built that record now has a polygon, which is both of those. And to show you, let's go in here, and in blue, this is the polygon for that record. All right, so to answer some of Nancy's questions, I forget some of them. So it isn't a polygon of the area covered by the record. No, actually it's the reverse. The record is sort of reactive. It shows you what's been built by that record. Matter of fact, if I go in here to my hub and I say, okay, so show me everything that's part of that record, and it will go and select all the lines, all the tax parcels that are part of that record. Okay, so it's sort of the reverse sort of relationship. The record doesn't come first. The record is reflective back. What was built as a result of this? All right. So the other question you had was whether or not a single line can be part of multiple records. The answer to that is no. No, it cannot be part of multiple records, because a line only gets marked by the record that created it, not any other ones that use it, but only the ones that created it. Okay, so it's not a one-to-one relationship, or it's not even a many-to-one relationship. It's neither of those. A record keeps track of and marks itself. It's a good way to say. It's like a dog. It marks itself on its trail. It marks itself on the polygons that it created, that were created when it was active, the lines that were created when it was active, and the points that were created when it was active. Doesn't mean it has to create a point for every line, because if you copy and go over one that has existing lines on it, it uses those lines. And to sort of show you again a little bit more how that works, if I go in here and I go to my lines, in this case, I'm going to go here to here, and then I'm going to go and start another line, but this one goes from here to here to here. All right. And again, it doesn't have to be selected. The record knows what it created. If I go in here and I say, okay, now create a parcel out of that, and that, the test for determining whether or not it's going to create a parcel is this seed. Tell it to create a seed. And in this case, I don't have a closed polygon, because I don't have, and to show you, I say select the records in here, I don't have a line across here. It doesn't evaluate anything other than what is marked with that record. So if I go in here and say, well, let's put a line from here to here, again, and I can unselect it just to show you it has nothing to do with that. I can say, okay, now create a seed. Now there's a little seed here. You can see it. It says, okay, now the things that are marked with this record, that will create a polygon. So when I say build it, it's going to evaluate the things that are part of this record, and it's going to say, okay, you've got lines here. These lines form a polygon because you have a seed there. I'm going to take that seed and expand it to those lines. And now I have a parcel there. So again, the fabric does nothing more than help you to build the parcels. It doesn't evaluate whether it's coincident with the other things underlying it or on top of it. It doesn't necessarily automatically clip things and make sure that things are in the right place. It just makes sure that you have valid parcels. You have a polygon, you have lines, and if those points don't share corners with other things, it creates points. That's all it does. And that's, again, as you get deeper in it, you realize there's attribute rules and validation rules and constraints, but that's it. It's to help you build parcels. So, and Esri especially doesn't like when I say this. The reality is you can build parcels without the parcel fabric. You can build parcels without them because you are really just using all of the ArcGIS Pro tools. That's it. They've built some very nice and very rich tools in here. But you're going to have to do it by hand. It's like, okay, which would you prefer, a typewriter or do you want a word processor? Sometimes you want to just go old school and do it that way. Other times it's like, no, maybe it would be nice to be able to move things around and do spell checking and this other stuff. That's really it. So hopefully,
Frank,
yes.
Jeanette asks a good question. Is the record the same as the plan in ArcMap?
It's not exactly the same because the plan in ArcMap Parcel Fabric had no geometry associated with it, so that it didn't have a polygon. It was just a separate table. But in fact, it serves much the same purpose. Show me everything that was in here, or do a search and zoom me over to the things that are in this plan or this record, those sorts of things. It allows you to go and build more information about that thing that helped create it. So it serves the same purpose, but it's not exactly the same. It now has geometry associated with it. So in many ways, it's more powerful than the plans were. All right. Okay. Nancy, did that help? I just
Brian says, Frank, what is this typewriter you speak of?
It's a mechanical
I'll
pencil.
tell you, Brian.
Yeah. So Nancy, did that sort of help? But the reality is, and this is where I sort of get into this confusion, is because I'm teaching both I'm going and doing the ArcGIS Pro seminars and teaching people how to use the Traverse tool and how to use all the construction tools and do everything to build this geometry. Well, that's exactly what the parcel fabric, it's just sort of the final step. And those of you up in Wisconsin who have heard me, for 2 years now telling you, if you want to get involved with the parcel fabric, if you want to learn how to build parcels, you got to get and you have to learn ArcGIS Pro Edit tools. That's it. If you learn the tools, you can do anything because the fabric is just checking to make sure you did it right. It's checking to make sure that you finished all of it. That's all it is on there. All right. Perfect.
I like it.
Perfect. So yeah, Nancy, to answer your question, yeah, they overlap so much that it's tough to differentiate one and say this is fabric versus, oh no, this is just pure editing. The reality is you learn the tools no matter what, and you just have this sort of extra thing like a turbocharging that you can do on it and say, okay, now let's make it easier. And I can tell you, between you and me, go ahead.
No, go ahead, finish.
I was going to tell you, I've already found where I'm working on things and pulling data in and all this other stuff. And sometimes I forget to do certain steps on it and I'll run through, and on this build active here, there's also this build extent, and I'll say, well, test to see, is everything in here built? And it will test not just the current or active record, but all the other records inside the parcel fabric and clean them all up at the same time. So it's a nice sort of double check on this to make sure it's all built correctly.
What are the attributes of that record, Frank? I mean, you created the record, but were there additional attributes you could add besides your name? And
Oh, yes, yes. So let me go over here to the data designer now on the records. So there is, by default, there's certain records in here or certain attributes that are in here. There's an object ID and a shape and a name field. And then there's a record type. And the record type causes a lot of confusion because from an organizational standpoint, if you want to keep track of a record and you want to differentiate between different records, how are you going to differentiate? Do you differentiate and say, this type of a record is for this layer, so you attribute it by your parcel types? Or do you say, this type of a record is an action, this is going to be a split or a combine or a subdivision, or whatever? Do you define it by action, or do you define it by the document itself? Now, with the ArcMap Parcel Fabric plan, it was always, well, let's reference it as a document. But the reality is,
right,
with a record, you can do anything in there, and there is no best practices defined by Esri yet on it. And in talking with the dev team, we're still trying to figure out what's the best way on there. So they've sort of said, well, let's give them an option to create a domain on here, and you figure out, what do you want to do? Do you want to make a record type that's, what type of layer does this go with, or what action did you take on this, or maybe documents? What type of a document caused it to, was it a GLO township plat? Was it a survey? Was it a deed of conveyance? I've actually got some clients that have gone even deeper than that, said, oh, no, this is a warranty, this is a special warranty, this is an easement deed, this is a trustee's deed. So they've gone even deeper, because to them it's meaningful to figure out what that document actually conveyed. Did it convey the entire bundle of rights, or was it just a select area? So that's part of the design. Right now, you see that I've turned it off. This, by the way, are the visible ones. I've turned the record type off, but that's one of the decisions when you first go into the fabric. Well, how am I going to handle my records? Am I even going to care about it, or am I just going to develop a naming convention, which is what a lot of my clients do? They'll just say, well, I don't need to set a record type, I'll do it by the name. And some of you use, well, this might be a subdivision, so it's SB dash or whatever it is. Or so again, they do that. And then the recordation date or the record date. What are you going to do with it? Then these are default. Kergo Accuracy. Kergo Accuracy is a little interesting in that this allows you to subjectively rate how accurate is this thing that I'm putting in there. I still have some problems with the way it's defined by default. It's defined according to a weighting system, and it's not really accuracy, it's more precision. And by the way, for most of you, only we surveyors can get involved in a debate over whether it's precision or accuracy that's on here, right? But that's what it is. It's sort of a subjective weighting that goes on in this. It's not used in anywhere except it's going to be used in 2.6 and 2.7 when you start applying least squares adjustments on some of this. So it's a weighting system for least squares adjustment. But you'll see it just like it was in ArcMap, you'll see it replicated on not just the record, but also the polygon and the lines that are used to create that. So again, Right now, it's sort of superfluous, but go ahead, Nancy.
Well, I was just going to pick up on Brian's comment. I mean, that would be an interesting place to put a limit on it, right? Like to say, well, if it doesn't close to one part in 5,000, tell me.
And that's sort of what it's intending to be. And here, by the way, there is this is the domain on here. And if I look at this right now, this is what Esri's put in here. That A is one is the highest, meaning this is really good information.
Oh,
And then it goes all the way down into the
okay.
lowest. And then 7 is just sort of exclude this from the LSA. But I challenge somebody.
So it's,
Yeah, I challenge somebody to tell me the difference between a 2 and a 3. It kind of doesn't.
yeah, I agree. It's a category. It's not. I was headed in a different direction. It's the category of the accuracy as opposed to the absolute reporting of the closure. It's not the linear closure. It's the category of the
Right.
accuracy of the.
Right. It is.
Okay.
And as you and I know, one of the problems by just putting closure upon a parcel is you then presuppose, but that parcel is described by a meets and bounds description. You know, as surveyors, we do that with our observations. We say that the measurements that we made close within this linear closure, and we can rank our observations, but we don't necessarily rank the actual parcel or the parcel description. If you have an aliquot description, if you have a bounded by description, if you have, any of those types of descriptions, none of them have any way to actually measure closure. So a misclosure accuracy really only deals with meets and bounds. And even then, I would argue whether that's correct. The meets and bounds is never meant to really close. It's meant to give you guidance as far as where those corners are. Anyway, so then to go down further on here, there's the accuracy.
We do have a question.
Okay.
Kelly asks, so the number of the accuracy is not like an arc map where we use the accuracy 2 for rank by date.
Kelly, by the way, I'm glad you joined. I'm glad you found it. Yeah, so it is actually the exact same as inside ArcMap Parcel Fabric. But again, you have to be careful with that in that it's really not an indication of accuracy. It is purely a subjective ranking that you assign to it. And what you assign might be something different from the next mapper over assigning on it. You've got to be careful with what you're saying on there. I can share with you, I've got several clients that use this, but it's as a subjective ranking. That's all. Oh, we got this from a good surveyor. Oh, no, we got this from somebody whose work is somewhat questionable. Or no, this came from an engineer. Or no, this looks like the landowner actually drew this thing up and it doesn't seem to close. Those sorts of things. And again, none of those have relationships to the quality of the conveyance of property. They only have relationship to some mapper interpreting that deed. That's all it is. So you want to be careful when you start putting those subjective things on there. But the bottom line is it is exactly like it was in ArcMap, still kind of, to me, still kind of an appendix. It really doesn't have a whole lot of use inside of here. But Esri's marketing people and I have a little dispute on that, whether it's actually meaningful. It's not.
So if I have a current parcel fabric and I've gone through the accuracy classification based on, I think BLM uses year to reflect the equipment that was in place and other things, then that number would be migrated to that field.
Yes, that's exactly what comes over. It is applicable to the ArcMap parcel fabric data that you're bringing in. It comes into that field. All right. So whatever the plan accuracy was set, that becomes the record accuracy. Whatever the line accuracy that was set, that becomes the line accuracy. And the same way with the polygon, that becomes the polygon accuracy. Because there are these three different places that accuracy is set. You can have a plan which is marginal, but some of the lines inside of there, or record which is marginal, but some of the lines may be really well measured. Those are very accurate, but some of the other lines may be questionable. You know, meets and bounds description, plus or minus to the following line. So if you get a primary monument and a secondary monument in that call, you can still rank that as being not quite as, the information that you store may not be as accurate as something that's got a little bit better definition on it. Nancy, you and I know that just because something is measured with an instrument which is not quite as precise as what we can measure right now, doesn't mean that's less accurate. I could argue that it's more accurate with those older measurements than it is with the new precise measurements, because you could just as easily be on the wrong pin, right? You could just easily be on the wrong pin. Yeah. So anyway, you can see
Does
how
the record
crazy I get
accuracy
about that field. Pardon me, go ahead.
Frank, does the record accuracy flow down to lines and polygons?
At the moment, I don't think it does. At the moment, I don't think it does. I think it just, if you have something in the arc map, it goes and flows backwards, but I think that's it. And we could test that. That's one of the things we might want to test right now is I'll take a record and I'll make sure that the accuracy is set at a certain level, and I'll create lines and then see if those lines inherit that accuracy. Let's check and see. All right. And then we have shape, length, and area, and the global ID, and then all the edit bys on here. The records also have a field called parcel count, because as I showed you and demonstrated, you can have a record that has more than one parcel in it. All right, so you can have multi-part records on here because it reflects all the parcels that were created while that record was accurate, or excuse me, while that record was active. That's why. So in 2.5, it actually has this additional field called parcel count, which tells you, oh, this record actually has 4 parcels associated with it. And really all it's doing is telling you how many parts are inside there. And then this data set that we're looking right now was originally an ArcMap Parcel Fabric that we have migrated over. So it has the ArcMap plan attributes in there. So it has description and surveyor and company and survey date and true mid-bearing and created by modified, all those others, it has those in there. So if you migrate an ArcMap fabric over, it keeps those plan attributes and puts them into the record. And you can add your own. I mean, this is nothing more than a feature class. It's just now included within, and I know Ashley doesn't like it, it's included in super topology, that's all. It's just another way to go and validate and test those other things on there. That's all it is. Interestingly, at 2.5, Esri introduced a new type of parcel record. Excuse me, a new type of parcel, a new parcel type. Got to get the terminology correct, right, Nancy? It's a new parcel type.
Yeah.
And that new parcel type allows you to validate the rules, but excludes itself from topology. All right, and so if I go in, yeah. So if I go in here and go and add a new, see if I can do it here. Yeah, if I add a new parcel type here, it has the option that says, come on. Okay, use for administrative boundaries. So if you think about it,
Oh,
now you
yeah,
understand. Yeah. So what it
yeah.
does is it lets it go and utilize the definitions, but doesn't necessarily utilize the topology engine for it. So it makes sure that you've got all the lines, make sure you got all the points, but when you go and edit something around there, it doesn't mark it as dirty. So that you can have zoning layers, you can have market areas, you can have city boundaries, you can have ESUs, you can have county boundaries that become part of the fabric, part of the super topology, without it messing up your topology. Because if they participated in topology, every time you edited something inside of it, the entire county would be marked as dirty and you'd have to reevaluate everything. So at 2.5, they have that capability to say, okay, I want this to participate in a fabric, but don't make it part of topology. All right. And that's called an
Be,
administrative area. All right. So,
be
for
still
example,
my
Nancy,
heart. I've been waiting
you
for that.
you could have census areas, census tracts, census blocks inside of a parcel fabric. All right. And have it start testing and validating and let you clean it up by having it be part of it there. All right. That's at 2.5.
That's great.
Yep.
That's
2.5.
great.
All right. So what we were going to do is we were going to and test whether or not the accuracy settings are inherited as you go down through them. So let me go and create a new record here. All right, and I'll do that, and I will set that this has the highest settings on here. All right. Now I'll go in here and I will create lines. Simple enough. All right, I will create lines. Now this new one, again, if I wanted just to verify how this works, show me the lines that were created that are marked part of this record. That's all it's doing. All right. So there's the lines that were marked as being part of this record. Let's check and see if it closes. That's what create seeds does. Let's check and see if this is closed. Sure enough, it's closed. All right, now let's go and build this. Let's go and build it. So let's look at these records. So here's my lines. And in fact, I will bet you that I have turned this off. I am so sorry. Let me go in here. And turn on the Kergo Accuracy, which still should have been in here. Oh, I have things that are not saved. Sorry. Now that I've saved them, let's go ahead and save that out.
Well, the good news is you didn't hang the entire program doing that, which I have done.
Correct. Okay. So Kergo Accuracy. Well, let's just make sure that maybe it should have been turned on for me to do that. So let's test this. All right. Same record. All right. I can go and create the parcel lines again. My record is let's create the seed. Let's create the parcels. Let's go and select this. By the way, I kind of know the answer, but I want to work through it just for you. Nothing.
Thank you.
Nothing.
What?
Well, the reason why I know the answer is because out of the box, most of this stuff doesn't get calculated. Out of the box, and this is more of a design strategy than anything else. Out of the box, the configuration the attribute rules, what gets inherited, none of that is set. You just want to be aware of that. That, yes, this is a fabric and this will do some minimal things for you, but don't think it's all set up for you. It's not. Let's just go to the polygons just to make sure. Now, I think I've turned that off on there too. I have, because I don't use it much. So, yeah, it doesn't, by itself, does not necessarily allow you to go and automatically have that set. You can set it up for yourself, but it doesn't necessarily say that out of the box, it's going to inherit any of those values between them on there. Thank you, Brian. All right. So let's go and select everything in here. Let's delete that. All right. Let's go and also look and see in our current extent. Here's the other one that I created. And let's go and get all of those. Maybe it's not this. No, maybe not. There's another one. Anyway, so we went down a big rabbit hole there, didn't we?
It's good though.
But
Good.
I think it was worthwhile. I think it was worthwhile. So do we have any questions right now of anything? The accuracy percentage, what is the name now? Yeah, you have that. That's, yeah. John, good question regarding does the accuracy then go down? Plan accuracy, record accuracy. Yep. There's a line, polygon, right. They all have them. You can turn them on and set them. Yeah, you just want to be aware of it. You get see that finish toys. Okay. By the way, Nancy, these chat things, they don't get saved. So you just want to be aware of it. You want to capture it, you might want to do it elsewhere, but those are really great notes. Okay. All right, what else can I do here? Let's go here. Let's a little bit clean up there. All right. So I think what the next thing I wanted to talk about was some of the things that some of the nice things that Esri has done with the Traverse, and what the Traverse is and what the Traverse isn't, so that we sort of understand that. I find that as I'm teaching it, because Esri we now have three different versions of Traverse that we can use. We have the ArcMap version, which everybody learned and loved. We have the ArcMap Parcel Fabric version, which was a little more challenging to get into, but once you got into it, you learned to love that also. And then you've got the ArcGIS Pro Traverse version. So let's talk about this and what this is. All right. So the Traverse allows you to go and create lines that have Kergo values on them. All right. And that really is it. It just allows you to create lines that have Kergo values on them. The Kergo values, and we've talked about this before, if we go and look at a Kergo line, a line that's enabled with Kergo's values, text lines. I could have done this differently, but here it is here. We can see that, for example, the direction field, which many of us just refer to as bearing, is no longer a string value. It's now a number value, all right? It is stored as a numeric value. And from what I've seen, it's actually stored as a numeric value that is basically north azimuth. Starts at north and goes in a clockwise direction, all right? You can tell it how you want that number shown back to you. You know, whether you want quadrant bearings, whatever you want, south azimuth, polar, whatever. But I think it's actually stored as polar, and it's decimal degrees in there. So
sorry to interrupt. We have a question though. Why is Traverse Tool located in the modify features rather than the create features section?
Nancy, it's a good question. Nancy, you've heard this before. The how do I questions, where is questions, those are easy to answer. The why questions has to do with somehow I might have some insight into the design and I don't. Why is it like that? Right? No, I can't answer that. I can tell you where it is, how to use it, why. I don't have any clue on that.
It's a thought process we're not privy to.
That's exactly right. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So on here, so the question I get every time I talk about this, because you'll notice the direction is now, it's a double word number. Distance is now a number. Radius is a number. Arc length is a number. Radius 2 is a number. These are all number fields now. These are no longer string values. All right. So the question I always get is, why? First of all, Nancy, right? Why is that? Why did you change it from that? And now I can suppose on this. I can't tell you exactly why, but I can suppose. And by the way, in ArcMap Parcel Fabric, they were also number fields. And I believe that they are numbers because Esri is wanting to recognize that these are more than just places to go and memorialize what deed information is. They want to be able to start giving you feedback, whether or not it closed, not just one time, but how it all closes, whether you have misclosures, whether there is a rotation set on it. And in order to do a rotation, you have to have that bearing, that direction, stored as a numeric value so that you can actually figure out what the current mapped is and what it actually is stored as far as the record. You have to have those. Same way with a comparison of the distance field. You need to have a numeric value that you can do a variance calculation on to figure out, has it been scaled up or down, and has it been rotated, those sorts of things. So my supposition on this is that the reason why they've changed these is because they want to be able to go and give you more meaningful feedback, not just feedback to you while you're editing, but be able to start doing validation on it and tests on it. Again, inside of the ArcGIS Parcel Fabric, there is validation tests and constraint tests that say, if this thing is more than X number difference from what the deed says, don't do it. So it's, again, starting to build upon that system where you can do complete validation on this. So that's it. I can tell you, and we're going to go next into one of my other subjects. And first I want to go radius 2. What is radius 2? Well, it's the beginning of allow you to go and have ellipses and spirals in here. All right. ArcGIS 2.5 allows you to store information for spirals. You can actually have spirals. Well, where are spirals used? They're used in railroads. They're used in highway design. You know, every time you get you get from a local road and you go on a clover leaf to go onto the highway, that's a spiral. And it's a ever decreasing radius is what's happening. It's allowing you to go from a high speed to a low speed by having that curve constantly get shorter and shorter and shorter. Those are spirals. And those of us that do work along highways and within railroads and stuff, they understand you need spirals. Well, with this data design, you can finally go and have spirals in here. All right. By the way, the actual software hasn't caught up to being able to graphically show you a spiral, but it is able to store these values for the spiral, and then it sort of approximates it when it draws the geometry of that feature on there. But then also, so on the Kergo, you now have direction, distance, radius, arc length, radius 2. My favorite question, Christopher, is what? What's missing?
What's missing?
What is missing here? Delta. There is no central angle anymore being stored. That's a great why question.
Yeah.
That's a great why question, because from a surveying standpoint, the central angle of a curve is more important than the core distance or the arc radius, because that's the real definition of what's being subtended there. Now, as Reed says, you can calculate that, but the core distance is the approximation between the ends of the curve. It's the distance between the ends of the curve. The arc distance goes and shows you how much of a bend is in that curve, but the singular angle, because we don't have radius points anymore, we don't have radius points in the ArcGIS Parcel Fabric, it's not needed anymore. So, by the way, those of us might point out, well, you've got one here, that's a carryover from the ArcMap Parcel Fabric. But inside the ArcGIS Parcel Fabric, you don't have that Kergo value anymore. With that said, so if you have Kergo lines, you now can go and do Kergo on them. Once you enable the Kergo lines in there, you can go and do Kergo on them. All right. So the first thing when you go to enact Kergo is, well, what feature class are you going to be creating lines for? And I can tell you that watching the way this thing gets run, it always goes and shows you the line that's up at the top of your table of contents. It kind of drills from the top down, and because you can have multiple types of lines, you can have a connection line, you can have what's called a link on here. You just want to be careful when you're starting a traverse. Virtually every single person I've taught has created a traverse and said, Frank, there's something wrong. It wouldn't create seeds. Why did it not create seeds? Because, and I can almost always answer, it's because you created connection lines, and you use connection lines to build a parcel, and there's no parcels associated with connection lines. So, all right, so starting at a start point, and then it comes down to, okay, give the bearing and distance in here, or the direction and distance in here, and you can use shortcut notation, a bearing, a dash, and a quadrant in here. You can use that. And then a distance field. Let's just put 200 feet in here and hit return. Every time you do that, it will move, and you hit return, it'll move to the next one. The difference between the ArcMap traverse and the ArcGIS traverse is that you hit return, you don't hit tab. It's return on each of these. So once I've done that, now I can go in here and say, okay, I can input my next one if I'm actually going and transcribing a deed, or if I'm just building something here. I can also do a deflection and say, well, I want to turn 90 degrees to the right from the previous direction I'm doing. So I can type in my deflection, and then I can type in my distance, and it will go and do it. So the other difference, and this is a key difference between this, is that the ArcMap fabric created a sketch, and it wasn't until you hit enter at the end of it that it took that sketch and created lines from it. All right. This traverse, every single time you hit enter, it creates a new line. Creates a new line. Constantly is creating lines on here. So these two lines already exist in my data set, even though I'm still in the middle of a traverse. And that's a big difference that you want to understand. It's not creating a sketch. You can take your courses that you've done and export them and store those as a series of lines, but it's not exactly the same as it doesn't function exactly the same as the ArcMap traverse does, right? It actually, every time you hit enter here, it creates a line on here. So again, my initial thing was, this is the way to create lines that have Kergo attributes on them. So if I wanted to go and create a curve at the end of this, I could actually go here and say, for example, that this curve, I could say that this is my tangent bearing at the end of it, and I could type 0 here, and I could say my radius is maybe 50 feet to the right, and it's not going to be an arc length that I'm going to be putting in, but I'm going to put in the delta angle or the central angle on here, 90 degrees. I can do that. And it will then give me the bearing, the tangent bearing coming out of that curve. So I could use that and say, okay, now 150 feet, and then I could go 90 degrees, 200 feet. Oh, I guess it's 250 feet, isn't it?
250.
250. Thank you. And then it will, if that final point is within my tolerance of my original located start point, it will give me a closure. So Brian is asking me, if I create a traverse of lines with defined bearings and distances from, say, a legal description plan, save it to the fabric, and then modify the shape of the parcel, do the bearings and distances change? Also, no bearing, no parcel measurement, real legal measurement view, correct. Correct. So Brian asked a couple things there. So let me go and show you these things. So I have now a set of courses that I've created lines from. I can go in here and I can say export this out as not my desktop. I can do here and put it into extra. I can put it in as a traverse. File, and this is a text file. I can save it out there. When I go to look at it, come on. Traverse text file. I can then edit that. And sure enough, this is exactly the same format as the ArcMap traverse file. The direction type is quadrant bearing. The direction units are degrees, minutes, and seconds. The starting coordinate pair, and then direction and distance, tangent curve. Delta is 90, radius is 50, direction and distance. So it allows me to at least record what's on here, what I've done with this. All right. And allows me to go and input all this. But every single time I do something, it goes and actually creates that feature. So for example, if I wanted to go and create a line that went here, and I'm just going to go and digitize this here. All right. Notice what happened here. Esri has said, well, the things that you digitize don't have the same weight as the things that you input. So that if I digitize a line or distance, while in the traverse, it doesn't store anything for me. It will record what that was, but it will just put brackets around it. And the brackets mean that as soon as you're done with this, that line is not going to have any attribution on it at all. That's what those lines were. If I wish to remove them, I actually have to click in there and edit those brackets out. But that will allow me to go and actually sort of get an approximation or a measurement on it. So I'm done with this. All right. So let's go and ask a couple more things. So Brian was asking me, well, what happens if in fact you go and do this? I'm going to create a seed here. I'm actually going to create a real parcel out of this. All right, I've created a parcel on here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go and take this point and move it. All right, when I move this point, all right, when I move that point, it's gone and it's moved everything that was in there. When I actually turn on my lines to label these, I'm going to label the bearings and distances of these lines. All right, I've got a lot going on here. Let's go and see what's happening here. All right. So you will see it does not change the information that's stored on those lines. It changes the overall geometry of those lines, but it does not change the attributes which are stored on those lines. All right.
So the move you just did when you moved that point down was a cartographic change, but the underlying measurement data remained the same. Is that correct?
Correct. It was just sort of to correct that a little bit more. It wasn't necessarily cartographic. It was topologic change is what I did. I moved not just the point, I moved the lines and the polygons that are associated or defined by that. Yeah. So yes, it is, but it was not, it did not in any way change any of the geometry which is stored, any of the attribution that is stored on there.
Frank, Brian
so now
asked,
if you went,
go ahead.
Continue, Nancy.
I was just going to say, similar to what Brian was asking, is that now if you did that topologic change that changed the cartographic presence of that parcel, then you, if you run an adjustment though and it had used those Kergo attributes, it would have respected the Kergo attributes, not the inverse that you created by moving the line.
So we're still in the speculative realm here, all right? Because we haven't seen exactly how least squares adjustments. Yeah. So least squares adjustment.
Fair enough.
There's two types of adjustments that can be done. There is a least squares adjustment, which depends upon the recorded information on those lines and uses that recorded information to figure out how things work, right? So theoretically, that if I had done that topologic movement and I did a least squares adjustment on it, the question is, how valid are those measurements still? You know, from a surveying standpoint, those are observations. How valid are those observations within my overall weighting of my least squares adjustment? I would say not very valid. So maybe that it's not a valid thing to do. So we'll have to wait to see what happens, you know, and whether or not it marks things like that as, you know, being in there. That obviously that should throw it off and say there's something outside the tolerances for making an adjustment on that point in there. The least squares adjustment, by the way, adjusts points more than anything else. And then if the point moves, then the lines move. That honestly is it. So, but then there's also a geometric adjustment or cartographic adjustment or topologic adjustment, whatever you want to call it. So that's what I'm going to do with this. I'm going to adjust this and tell it where to place this. So I'm going to go to records now. And by the way, I've got an active record and it knows where this thing is. It knows what's attached to it. And I can go in here and say, I'm going to align the parcels. All right. And I want to go and say that I want to take this piece and go over here. And I want this piece to go here. All right. And I want to go and align these on here. And I've told it I want to align my active record. That's what I clicked here. The things that are in my active record, go ahead and align them and put them here and go ahead and do that. All right, it went and aligned that, but it didn't align everything else. This was way far off, but it would allow me to go and place this. Let's undo that again. And let's go back and do this a little bit more realistically. And delete this, delete this one. All right, and instead, let's do the active record. Go from here to here, here to here, and here to here. All right. Again, I probably should have put a geometry on this here, but so the question of contiguity, the question of along, adjacent to, contiguous to, all of that, that's all handled by these geometric adjustments that occur within the parcel fabric. All right. Again, I just took that thing way off and did that, but it sort of will show you that's sort of how these things within the parcel fabric, how this thing would work, and how it's supposed to work on here. I can tell you that this is a parcel fabric tool, but let's go and do this. Let's get off of here. Let's take these two and get rid of these and get rid of this. Let's select everything that's in here, but instead of doing this one, let's go and do a standard transform. All right, now this is a standard tool that says, okay, here to here, here to here, here to here, and here to here. Now I can tell it the different types of transformations that occur. Again, this is not a parcel fabric tool. Parcel fabric's assuming you're going to place this thing very close to where you should be. In this case, this is just a standard editing tool. And let's figure out, do I want to do an affine transformation? Do I want to do a similarity? Do I want to rubber sheet this using linear adjustments or nearest neighbor on there? I can test them all on here. So let's do an affine transformation. An affine transformation requires 3 links on here. That's not bad to do an affine transformation on here, right? Not bad. I go back here and say, well, maybe I don't want to do an affine. Maybe I want to do a similarity transformation and have it go and do that. Yeah, that one's not quite right because of that corner there. Let's go back. Maybe I want to do a rubber sheeting on here, a linear rubber sheeting. Definitely not. Definitely not. And maybe a natural? Definitely not. So, in this case, simple tools will sometimes allow me to get a different solution on here than the parcel fabric tools. Again, it comes back to this. I am so glad you started us off with that, Nancy, that to recognize that it's nothing but a bunch of tools, some of which will make sure that everything's on your everything that's in your parcel is what's needed, and other things are just, how do I use these tools to get this thing to go where I want it to go? All right. Okay. So by the way, if I still had issues here, I could then go and do one of Nancy's tools, this Align Features tool. All right. And I could tell it to go and draw a line and just tell it what
That's my fave.
there it is. And I could
tool.
say I could go from here to here and take every point that's along there. Oh, let me go and turn off my parcel fabric topology. And tell it to go ahead and align. I could do the same thing over here. So it's a combination of learning these tools, but using that power of the parcel fabric to really sort of reinforce and make sure everything is right on there. All right. I do want to go and share with you that one of the things, and if you were really watching me, you saw the traditional way of creating a parcel was go and draw lines and then figure out if it closes and build a polygon, which is sort of how, as you would prefer that we do this. So that's the most common type of workflow. Matter of fact, if I look here, I don't have corners here anymore. Let me go back here and let's build and now I have the corners on here. There's slight difference in the symbology, but now I have corners. So the common element, the common workflow is create a record, build the lines, create the seed, build the polygon, put it in place. It's commonly the workflow you've got. But because if we recognize that these tools are really nothing more than another way to make sure that we complete our parcel, I can go in here to here and I could say, I want to build a polygon here. I want to start here. I want to go to here. I want to go perpendicular to this, to here, and I want to go to here. All right, and I want to finish that. There's a polygon that I've built. So I can go and build things, not by drawing lines, but I can build them by creating polygons and then using the power of my parcel fabric, the power of my super topology. By the way, please don't, SU doesn't like when I do that, but it's the easiest way to go and explain this. And then use this to say, hey, let's check this thing, make sure it's there. And sure enough, now I have everything I need. If I look here, there's my one line there. There's my other line there. It's built it all for me. So the parcel fabric will let me to build this. So I can build things, whatever is easiest for me. I can build it from lines if I've got a meets and bounds description. If I've got an existing parcel that sort of is used and I've got an aliquot description, if I've got a description that says, hey, go and take the north 10 feet of this parcel, well, you know what? I can go in here and I can use my divide tool and I can say that I want to go and divide this. I want to take 10 feet off of this end. Let's make it more so that you can see it. I can take 50 feet off that north end. That's an aliquot description. with the parcel fabric, and I could say, go ahead and divide that thing up. And I've now done a split on a parcel. And let's make sure I've got everything I need. It's all built. I've got everything I need for this parcel. I just did the north 50 feet of that parcel for a transaction. You don't necessarily have to draw lines.
So you could have a record that would be the May 14th, 2020 work, essentially, right? I mean, because it looks like you're accumulating it all. It looks like you're accumulating it all into the same document, or record, right? I mean, that would be a strategy.
Yeah, it's not a great strategy. It's a great strategy if you're working in one area.
It's a great strategy.
Yeah. So it's a great strategy if you're working in one area, because remember, it's not just these lines and polygons I'm building, but every time I hit active or every time I tell it to build it, not just is it doing this, it's building that record polygon. So if I have it during the day, I go and build things all across the county, it's building a polygon that is all across the county. All right. And when you get involved in big, it's building a record polygon. So it's not a great strategy to do that. It's better to go and have it individual transactions. Again, you can do it, but that doesn't mean it's the best way to do it.
Yeah, I was thinking if you had an area and you're doing parcel cleanup, I've pulled my stuff in and I'm starting to work. Now I'm going to take this area of the map and I'm going to spend all day and I'm going to get this data clean. I can make all of that as a one record, and then afterwards I can note that this record was not a legally recorded document. It was my cleanup efforts. And I could make a notation of that.
Great point. Great point, because you only should use records if you wish to track that transaction. All right. If you want to do cleanup of existing things, you don't necessarily need a record. You can make that record inactive and do all of your geometry cleanups. And it doesn't track what that was. It just says, okay, I'm cleaning up dirty data. That's all it is. Because remember the tools.
But I can still use the tools?
You can still use all the tools. Yeah, the only tools you can't use is the build, the align. Right? Once that the build is just going to go and check everything else, make sure you've got everything in there. And the align is just going to look at your active, but with the align, you can even go and select. You can change your selection and say, I just want to align this. So I maybe misspoke there. You can use all these other tools. You just can't use copy lines to or create seeds or any of these other record related types of tools. But you could use everything else in there to do all your cleanup. Matter of fact, Esri talks about this as record driven and quality driven. Quality driven workflows are where you're just cleaning stuff up. You're just in there, you got something bad, you want to fix it up. You don't have to go and create a record for that. The tools work across this.
But you could create a dummy record for the purposes of cleanup if you had to.
I've done that, yeah. We go and do it. That's sometimes it's a great strategy on there too. All right.
Not optimum, but
okay. So thank you, Chris. We are at the official end of this seminar. We're at 4:30. Goes by quickly, doesn't it? Goes by quickly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and turn off the recording. But we've introduced something here recently, and we'll want to continue with this. It's called office hours. We just turn off this meeting, and I'm going to turn it off now.
Thanks for attending, and we hope you enjoyed this workshop. If you have questions, would like some more details about anything we discussed during this workshop, or if you or anyone at your organization would like information about training, support, or ways in which we can help you with your GIS needs, please contact me at frank@pandaconsulting.com or call me at 561-691-3277 and we can discuss how we can help you with your needs.